I just saw a woman accuse a man of being a pedophile at a playground only for him to respond with something like "I lost my daughter a few days ago." Reddit, what's the most saddest unkind ignorant thing you've seen? I was driving when I stopped at a red light and saw a homeless man walking down the street. I then proceeded to see 3 kids, probably in middle school, walking with food, specifically bread. When they saw the homeless man, they went up to him and I had thought that they were going to give him some food, but instead, they looked at him and threw the bread in the street. The homeless man then went and picked up the bread off of the street while the 3 kids kept on walking laughing at the homeless man. One of the saddest things I've seen. Middle school kids are almost universally jerks. I used to be a substitute teacher. I'm 6 feet 4 inches, 250 pounds and have a giant beard. I usually taught 1st, 4th grades. I wore a name tag and typically wore a suit as it was a private Ivy League elementary school. One day at lunch I went out to my car to get a bag of Tootsie Rolls I was going to hand out to the kids after lunch as part of a game, and some kid's mom saw me and immediately assumed I was a pedophile there to abduct and rape a child. She called the cops. I was in the hall when she and a cop came in and she screamed at the top of her lungs, "There he is. There's the pedophile." The cop told me she had reported me as being a child sex predator and that he was sorry for the embarrassment and wasting my time. She never apologized to me, but she was charged with trespassing by the school for wandering around on campus with no name tag. Karma's a bee, and so was she. I didn't see it personally, but a few years back a bald friend of mine was walking across a university when he was randomly shouted at for being a racist skinhead. Friends say he turned to accusers and calmly informed them, much to their horror and embarrassment. That's cancer boy to you. So being bald automatically makes you a racist skinhead? WTF. I'd say the saddest thing that happened to me occurred when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I remember that my mom, my brother and I were walking around the mall talking about maybe seeing a movie that afternoon. While we were walking out, a lady approaches my mom and asks if she's name. She says no one keeps walking very purposefully to our car. Now, the lady had my mom's name right, so I knew something was amiss. The lady has 2 security guards at this point and is following us to our car, telling her that she needs to speak with her and this and that. All the while my mom is denying that she is who she is. When we get to our car she yells at my brother and I to get in. My brother stands with his arms crossed saying, "No, Mom. He is only 2 years older than me and I still don't understand how he was mature enough to do that. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know what's going on and my brother isn't getting in the car and my mom is trying to book it out of there. I didn't want to leave me brother and I didn't want my mom to get into trouble, so I sat there confused by passenger side door. Next thing I know my mom is trying to pull me into the car as a security guard is pulling me out of the car. The guard wins and my mom guns it out of the back of the parking spot with the passenger side door open, which caused it bend backward and really screwed up the car that was in the spot next to her. So I see her speed off with this jacked up door and me and my brother left in the parking lot. I was pretty scared as the lady and guards walked my brother and I to the back room of a Lane Bryant or something. My brother and I were pretty silent as random employees would try to come up and talk to us as we waited for my mom to come back, not knowing if she would or not. After a couple of hours she did come back and we were allowed to go home. My mom has a long history of things like identity theft and forgery type crimes and has been in and out of jail for over 15 years now, but that was the first time that I ever knew anything was up. She's a pretty compulsive liar to the point that I think she actually believes some of the excuses she manufactures, so I've never really known what the deal was that day. But standing in the parking lot watching my mom speed away from her kids to save her own butt was probably the saddest unkind ignorant thing I've seen. TLDR, I don't talk to my mom anymore. My husband used to bring his lunch to work and then would go eat in his car around the block parked under a tree. When he was done eating, he'd read his book and relax for a while. One day, someone came up to him and told him they didn't ever want to see him around there again because there were kids in the area. The suggestion, of course, was that he was a creepy sex offender. I can't tell you how hurt he was. Seriously, what is the world coming to? Why can't a man smile at a child without being a pervert? The saddest part is that we're effectively creating the world that we're afraid it is. I would have told them to shut the frick up and get in the trunk. There's candy in there. I was at a spray park with my son a few years ago when I noticed another, roughly 2, my guess, little boy walking towards the street where I also noticed a full dump truck heading down. The driver wasn't slowing down. I immediately yelled to another dad nearby to watch my son and I quickly raced for the road and barely saved the little boy from being crushed. I got grazed by the truck but was fine. The child's mother raced over after someone apparently clued her in and screamed at me, "Get your disgusting paws off my child, you butthole," she went on and on, even as others who saw the incident tried to explain. I stood frozen, unable to speak. I was in shock by her reaction. She wanted her child to die and he ruined it. Personal story here. When I was 16 or so, I was sitting at a local pool one fine day, watching my sister swim as she was too young to go alone. Note, this was back in the day before smartphones were all over. I had a flip phone which had a broken camera. I was texting a few friends and playing a game on it when suddenly a man walks up to me and says, "I know what you're doing," to which I reply, "Playing Tetris." He says, "Every time my daughter goes down the slide, I see you taking pictures of her. Now I'm going to go around and tell all the other fathers here what I saw." With that he got up and left. Within a few minutes I was being stared at and yelled at from across the pool. My sister began to get scared, so we left, and when we got outside there were police waiting for me. Of course I was in tears after being harassed by the fathers of the pool. The police let the guy walk away, didn't even get his name. They searched my phone, which had literally nothing on it, and even tried taking a picture with the camera, which of course did nothing because it didn't work. They let me go home and I did the only thing I knew how at that age. I told my mom, and boy, was she pee. She called the pool and bitched out anyone that would listen, even making the head lifeguard cry. Then she called the local pool director and we sat down with a lawyer to sue them. Eventually I said I didn't want to go to court and an apology would suffice, which I got. Your mom, she is awesome. At a layover in O'Hare, lounging at my gate, pretty crowded because our flight had been delayed, there was a black man in his mid-50s standing across from me near the end of the row of chairs. He would occasionally lean down to talk to the woman seated near him, obviously his wife. Well, about half an hour later, he bends over and starts searching for something in his bag on the chair next to him. This woman behind me yells, "Excuse me, is that your bag?" in an incredibly condescending and accusatory tone. The man straightened up and politely replied, "Why, yes it is, but thank you for asking." I was so floored, I turned around and glared at her. She started to say something and I interjected, "He's been standing there for at least half an hour. Dumb shit. Of course it's his bag." Well, she shut the frick up after that. I love this. Thank you for saying something. My parents have lived in the same apartment for 30 years. Our family is friends with management. We've all helped take care of the complex in some form or another. My dad's even worked on the swimming pool. One day, maybe 5 years ago, my dad was waiting at the end of the driveway for his cousin to come pick him up. The driveway is the designated bus stop area, and some butthole mom, who had maybe lived there for a year, comes marching down the driveway accusing my dad of waiting to prey on the little kids as they get off the bus. Granted, he probably should have shaved his mustache years ago, but for frick's sake. I was at a web professionals conference less than a year ago, and at those professional conferences, we all use Twitter to chat about presentations and goings on. Someone made fun of someone else on Twitter for having a pager in this day and age, and people loved it and retweeted it like crazy. When we went out for drinks after the day, I was talking to a lady who got some food and bent over to check something and a beep sounded. It was her insulin meter. Yes, she was sitting next to the person who made fun of her for having a pager. The look of gratitude on her face when I asked her if she was using an insulin meter was radiant and heartwarming. I have an insulin pump. Two things always amaze me. 1. How quick people are to make fun of me for wearing a beeper. 2. How freaked out and guilty they look when I tell them it's an insulin pump and they think they've offended me. Seriously, most diabetics think it's funny. I just tell people I'm a cyborg and that it's my battery pack. I had a handicap parking pass in high school because I had to wear a leg brace to support myself after a serious injury. There was a teacher who saw me pull up in the handicap spot and walk. She said, "Don't you know it's wrong to steal that from your grandparents and use it?" I pulled up my pant leg and said it was mine. The look of horror on her face was all the punishment I was looking for. I started to walk away and said, "Don't be so quick to judge." I had a friend in middle school. My friend and I walked her home one day because she missed the bus and lived down the street from us. Her mom flipped her crap, said we were drug dealing rapists and were trying to corrupt her. Neither of us smoked or drank or anything like that. We were like 13, just trying to get our friend home safe because she was new to the area. Good times. Sigh. Overbearing parents. I must have only been around 16 years old as I just left school. I was walking down the street just around the corner from my house and there were a few kids on their scooters. One of them fell off and hit his head on the curb. I picked him up, asked his friends where he lived and followed them to the kid's house. His mum must have heard the crying because she came running out of the house, practically dragged the kid from my arms. The look on her face was as though I'd gone into her house on Christmas Day and pee on the dinner. She told me to never touch a kid again. No thanks for being a good citizen or anything like that. I still can't understand that reaction. My brother tells a story of how he was asked to move seats on a flight from Sweden due to being seated next to a child. Apparently there is a rule that an adult male cannot be seated next to an unaccompanied minor. He was happy to comply but was then paraded along the aisle while the flight attendant made an announcement asking if a woman would volunteer to swap seats with this man because he is not allowed to sit next to a minor. No further explanation was given. The situation was poorly managed and my brother was made to feel quite uncomfortable for going out of his way to be accommodating of the rules. Can someone confirm that this is a usual practice on flights? Or is it a case of, he looks sketchy, let's move him? I doubt it. I'm 15 and a week ago got a plane from London to Germany and from there to Turkey. I flew by myself and both times sat next to a man in his 40s with a weird as heck smile. I was with my 5-year-old dog there at Walmart and she needed some pants and shorts. We got a few off the rack and went to the fitting room. When I got there, the attendant said I was not allowed to go in the room with my daughter. I said balls. I went in, had her try them on and when I got out the assistant manager and security was there to meet me. I told them she is my daughter and about that time the general manager came down. He evaluated the situation and determined that the rule in place was not for my situation. He apologized and we all left. I felt like a pedo. So I'm walking along a street in Pasadena, California with my wife, just minding my own business. Ahead of me is a mother and her son. The kid is probably 2, maybe 3, toddling along behind her in his Oshkosh's while mom yaks on her cell phone. For some reason Junior gets it into his head that he needs to cross the street or play in traffic or something and takes a hard left while mom is looking away, oblivious. Just as he steps off the curb into the busy traffic I reach out and grab him by the straps of his overalls, lift him up, and deposit him, safe and sound, back on the curb. The kid is completely unfazed by this. Mom, however, loses her mind. She starts shouting at me about how dare you touch my child and how she's going to call the police and whatnot. I waited, and in a calm voice said, "Mom, your child was running into traffic." I pulled him back onto the sidewalk to keep him safe. Have a nice day. And then we just walked off and left her there. Seriously, pay attention to your dang kids. Somebody said my uncle was lazy and that's why he couldn't get a job. He worked shoveling coal every day walking back and forth from working a total of 10 miles every day. He is wheelchair bound now. Buttholes man. Frick them. Jesus, that is just horrible. As a father I have had similar incidents with people calling me a pedo and other not so wonderful things. In another post I related to a time I was at the library with my kids and my wife and I was sitting in the kid area when a lady walked by and said "you sick freaking pedophile" and proceeded to go get security. My wife and kids had gone to the bathroom and when they came out the lady saw them with me and had a look of shock on her face. I know who was freaking sick in that story, and it wasn't you. I had a teacher accuse me of plagiarizing when I turned in an awesome essay and called me out in front of the whole class and said she had reported me to the dean for suspension. When I talked to her after class, she said that she had entered the first sentence of my essay on Turnitin and found that there was a sentence almost exactly like the one I wrote. So I asked her to please let me type the rest of the essay on Turnitin and check then. So I did, nothing was plagiarized. Felt so good to have her apologizing to me in front of her students. My uncle took his daughter for a walk around a forest. Some old lady called him in as a pedophile. Police came and began arresting him in front of his daughter before he was able to explain to them that that was his dog there and they were just out for a walk. Boy was he ever mad. This is nowhere near as bad as most of the things on here, but it really bothers me. I will oftentimes be out with my 2-year-old daughter and or my 6-month-old son and it never fails. In making small talk with people, they will most often make a comment about me babysitting the kids today. Number. It's called parenting, you jackass. As if just because I'm a guy, I only have a passive or occasional role in parenting my children. This really pisses me off. My husband and I have 3 children and people always say things like this. Even his mother will say, oh, get Joe to babysit the girls today while you go to the doctor or whatever. They are his children. He is parenting, not babysitting. I feel like this post needs a happy story, so here you go. I was 15 years old and about 6 foot tall. I was a big boy, and I was in Walmart with my girlfriend because she needed some tampons or something. Anyway, I was walking down one of the aisles when I spotted a little 5-6-year-old kid just sitting there and bawling. I went over to him and asked him what was wrong. And he said, I can't find my mod, 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 I can't find my. I'm a normal-ish 19-year-old girl, and I babysit a lot. I'll take the kids to the park or to the store, just out of the house. I don't have a wedding ring, and my engagement ring is on a necklace, because that's the way I like it. Every time I go out in public, I get verbally beat down because everyone assumes I'm a single mother with 3 kids, so I'm told how to carry the child. Sometimes I'll carry one of them on my shoulders at the park. Apparently that's a terrible thing to do, or that I shouldn't be buying a certain thing for a child that age. And one time this woman, who had 4 kids and was probably not even 30, came up to me and handed me a box of condoms. This isn't the only time it's happened. It pisses me off when this happens, but I do like the look on their faces when I tell them I don't have a uterus and can't have children. It's funny. You shouldn't be buying a certain thing for a child of that age, as that's inappropriate, but handing out a box of condoms in front of children isn't. At a local grocery store a few years back, they had disabled people that wanted to work, bag the groceries. 2 15-16-ish-year-old boys went though and started chatting with the guy that had Down syndrome. Kids, hey man, those Velcro shoes are really neat. Disabled guy, thanks, they are my favorite. Kids, laughing, I bet. Where can I get some shoes like that? Disabled guy, my mom got them from Walmart. Kids, yeah, Walmart shoes are really cool. The kids were being overly sarcastic and complete jerks. If it wasn't for the fact the guy didn't understand they were teasing him, I would have went off on them. I actually did look for them in the parking lot after I was done, but they were gone. Pisses me off when kids are disrespectful to people. Makes me want to slap their parents. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I catch dirty looks from moms at the mall and park when I'm alone with my kids. It's pretty frustrating because I'm a badass dad. Maybe I should stare at my iPhone rather than interact with my kids like so many of the moms I see. Well, I guess this applies. My first job was being a bagger at a grocery store in Marietta, GA, East Cobb County, to be specific. Just for interest's sake. People in this area are all pretentious douchebags whose entire purpose in life is to make more money than their neighbor. Anyway, so there I was, working, and doing my job, which I did quite well. I won the regional bagging competition all 2 years I did it, when this person comes into my line in one of our motorized carts. Our policy is that if someone comes through the line, you have to take them out to their car to make sure they don't get hit in the parking lot, and to drive the cart back in when they're done. You also have to be 18 to drive one of the carts. I noticed that the customer next to me had just gotten into line. and she was a little farther along in the process of putting things up on the belt. I look around to see if there's anyone else who's 18 working that can help the lady in my line out, and there was not one. So I go up to the disabled lady and start helping her unload her cart, and I'm talking to her, etc. All of a sudden I notice the customer on the lane next to me. This soccer mom, best way I know to describe her, is bagging her own groceries while giving me this awful glare. I ignore her and proceed to help the disabled woman unload. I get back to my end of the register and start bagging the disabled woman's groceries. All the while the woman on the other register keeps glaring. She eventually finishes, and then says in a decisively loud voice to her cashier, "I would love to give that boy's parents a piece of my mind. I bet he'll wind up just as useless and pathetic as they are." Now, let me spell out this woman's mistakes. 1. Everyone who worked in that store loved me and my parents. 2. She didn't expect anyone to say anything back to her. As soon as she said this, all the registers around me got completely quiet. No beeping, scanning, or conversation. The woman stood in shock. The cashier I was bagging for, who was this sweet older lady, turned around and basically tore that woman a new one. She told the woman that she would like to meet her parents and see if they are as rude and obtuse as she is. She told the woman that I was literally the best bagger in the store, if not in the county, and that I knew exactly what I was doing. And to top it all off, she then told the woman that my father was one of the kindest men she had ever met, and that he actually has a PhD in enterprise risk management, makes plenty of money, and spends it on much better things than you do. The woman's jaw dropped, her world shattered, and I stood there in victory. One of the rudest moments of my life turned into one of the best moments of my life. I was dating a girl that worked at her family's business. It was built by her grandfather, who had started out cutting grass as a kid, and built it into 150-acre tree nursery that included a few large brick buildings, several cinder block and glass greenhouses, lots of heavy equipment, a separate garden center, and he also cultivated an ornamental flower into a new color. By the time I was around, the grandfather was in his 80s, shuffled around with a cane, and always had the stereotypical old guy hat and sweater on. Occasionally I would help out when they had a large project, and the grandfather would usually instructed me on how something should be done, which was almost always different than how his family members were doing things. Whenever he tried to instruct or offer advice to them, they usually responded with a "shut up, you don't know what you're talking about." Besides being extremely disrespectful, it was a bit bold, considering they were all working at a place he started from nothing and lived in houses or on property that he owned. They treated this man like complete crap, despite them all living off the hard work he put in. One night, while I was in the office area, they didn't know I was there. I overheard him trying to explain to his granddaughter the correct ratio of potting mix ingredients needed for the plants they were potting the next day. This was met with the typical "shut up, you don't know what you're talking about." When his granddaughter walked away, I saw him standing alone, dejected, in the foyer of the business he built, and he says to himself, "I'm going to die soon, and everything I know is going to die with me." By far, the saddest thing I have ever witnessed. I broke up the girl about a week after this, more than just the crappy treatment of their grandfather, and, aside from friends of friends, cut off contact with the family. A couple months later, I found out that the grandfather had died about a month after I split. Within a couple of years, the family sold the, now failing, business off. My neighbor running down the street yelling that she needed to speak to my then 10 years old sister. I had been on the front deck porch area when she came up to me and started yelling at me for my sister. I told her it wasn't her place to yell at my sister as my mom and stepdad walked out to hear her call me a disrespectful C and who should mind her own business. To that I just turned around and went inside to watch this lady go ballistic on my mom, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, because my mother wouldn't let her scold my sister and or my mom wouldn't scold my sister in front of my neighbor. Through this whole thing the women kept insisting my mom was going crazy while my neighbor was yelling and screaming because of a 10-year-old. Backstory: turns out her 11, almost 12 years old daughter starting poking fun at my sister for having divorced remarried parents and told her that they didn't love her enough. Pretty much that it was her fault and said some other mean things. My sister came back with the only response she could think of, which was to pretty much brush it off and say, well, at least I'm not fat. That started a crap storm to completely fricked up things the girl was saying about my family that she could have only heard from her parents. My 10 years old sister got our 12 years old sister involved and decided to cut out fast food coupons. Put them in envelope with a letter that said, to aid your addiction you fat biatch. Note it did say biatch. Girl started crying and told mom. I was sexually abused by my brother and another man who was a family friend. My sister doesn't let me around her kids. Her explanation. Verbatim. I don't want you to touch my kids because you're likely to, because you were molested. And that can make people become pedophiles. So as a result I'm not allowed to be an uncle and am isolated from my family at times. Nearly all of my dad's side of the family is abusive and I have nothing to do with them. Because of it, you can be my uncle. This isn't on par with any of the racist, sexist etc. stories on here, but it's something that happens to me a lot. Of the many times I've played pond hockey, there have been plenty of instances of parents walking, not skating, walking, through the middle of our game to either A, insist we let their kid play and let them score a goal and go easy, or B, ask us to stop playing altogether so their kid doesn't get hurt while skating on the other half of the ice. We're a group of early to mid-20s guys and it's quite insulting that just because these hosers have kids, they think they can start making demands as to how and when we play. Usually we try to be polite and say no, this is public space and we have claimed our area, but they don't care to hear it. I understand wanting to protect your kid, but if you are that concerned, flood your backyard for your own rink instead of trying to boss around a bunch of strangers. Of the many times I've played pond hockey, these hosers, flood your backyard for your own rink, the Canada is strong with this one. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.